Welcome back to Invest Global. Today we're going over 4 main ways to acquire this Georgian passport. 3 of them really come down to residency. So with the residency program in Georgia, you have to understand you have temporary residency, which you can qualify for. We'll talk about the residency by investment, how to obtain it through a work permit, and for students. So the second options don't require that upfront capital. We'll be discussing all that and more, but essentially with these residency programs, you have to understand there's a lot of time value that's kind of extracted, right? So there is a way to expedite this process, and this is really the citizenship by acceptance program or citizenship by investment, which really is just a donation to the country of Georgia. This program has kind of been a bit wishy-washy. If you don't know the proper people, it can be a bit of a challenge to this, because this is not something where you can just go on a website and find citizenship by investment programs like you can do in the Caribbean, like St. Kitts and Nevis. But we'll talk about all that and more in this video. Essentially what I want to break down is kind of this idea around the residency permits and then acquiring citizenship by naturalization, right? So you have citizenship by donation, you have citizenship by investment, which kind of go together, right? And then you have citizenship by naturalization. You also have there's many ways to get citizenship, right? You have citizenship by descent. And really with the residency, essentially what you have is a situation where within 6 years, you can acquire the permanent residency here in Georgia. And I've actually been here for a bit over a month now, heading to Armenia tonight, and it's been an interesting time here. I really enjoy the country, and I definitely would see myself living here for a longer time. Typically, I'm always traveling around different emerging markets, meeting with lawyers, setting up bank accounts, touring different real estate properties, so spending more than a month in one individual country typically is not too normal for me. I like to kind of see all the options out there. But as far as Georgia goes, I would love to live here for longer. And I think this is where I do see there is an option for someone who's a student, someone who wants to work in Georgia, and we'll kind of talk about those things a bit more. But the main thing here, just to wrap up the residency permit, how this works through actual citizenship by naturalization, right, where you actually have to physically be living in Georgia a certain amount of days out of the year. So with this program, essentially what you have is, like I said, 6 years, you can then obtain the permanent residency, and then 5 years is what it takes to get citizenship by naturalization, okay? So you have to understand that in those 3 main ways to obtain residency, and then we'll talk about the citizenship by investment program. And at the end of this video, we'll also talk about kind of the passport analysis and just my kind of closing thoughts as I leave for Armenia tonight, really. So the first one, citizenship by, not citizenship by investment, essentially acquiring a residency permit through investment, right? So this essentially is when you purchase a property here in Georgia, which there's a ton of incredible properties, I will say. The market that I really love is here in the capital city of Tbilisi. I also really love Batumi, and Batumi, there's definitely some different things. I made a video on that, so you can go check that out. Anyways, the point is it's $100,000. If you purchase a property worth $100,000, and it gets you actually bring someone in, you have to have like all this done legally, obviously, to get the residency permit. They approve you, then you can get essentially a temporary residence, right? With this, like I said, within 6 years, then you can get the permanent residence, and then 5 years you can get citizenship by naturalization. So a bit of a longer process, right? And you do have kind of that upfront capital. This is more for people that I work with. Typically, I'm working with more entrepreneurs, investors, people like that. I'm not necessarily working with students or people working for a company, but these are 2 options if you're watching this video and you are interested in that, right? So if you don't have that upfront capital to invest in a country, and especially if you don't want to have the sunk cost at a young age, like maybe, if someone's like 50 or 60 years old and they have, over like 8 figures to invest, this is not going to be that big of a deal for them, right? They can set up an easy residency where they have, with a passport, you have Schengen zone access, you have access to a lot of the South American countries. Again, at the end of the video, I'll talk a bit more about that. But the other 2 options really come down to if you're a student or you're working. So let's talk about working first. The main thing here to understand is they're not going to just give you a work permit if you're going and working at the normal restaurant down the road, or you're going to go work at, the grocery store, right? These residency programs are given out to very, very large companies in Georgia that are in a high growth sector. So things like technology, things like the medical industry, you could say the banking industry as well. So these are all things where you have to get them approved. So I would say the rate of getting rejected for a residency permit would kind of go, you could break it down in 3 ways. If you're going to invest in real estate, $100,000, you're probably not going to get rejected if you do it properly, especially if you meet with the proper lawyers. You can reach out to us. I have an email link down below in the description. It's just contact@investglobal.io. So that's like the least rejection option. And then I would say the student is a second, because you can kind of prove that you're actually going to be studying here in Georgia, and then you can get a residency permit off that. The third is the kind of like most, I would say relatively, right, the most risky out of being rejected is that work permit, because it does have to kind of fit the narrative. So you have to kind of put yourself in the position of the government's shoes and go, okay, they essentially want people to come in who are being productive. You have to be a value add to a country if you're looking to obtain a citizenship, especially if it's a non-official citizenship, which again, we'll talk about that here in a second. But when it comes to these residency options, right, so these kind of three we talked about, so the $100,000 in property, then you have the work permit, and then you have the student permit. The student permit's a lot easier to get because you can essentially prove that you will actually be studying here in Georgia, and you can get a permit relatively easy. The work permit, it's a bit different. Again, you can reach out to me if you have any questions, or you can meet with a local lawyer here in Georgia. But the main thing to understand is you don't want to have this, you don't want to just like try and set these things up and make all these plans before you actually come here to Georgia. Especially if you're from like most Western countries, most, like I would say, kind of developed countries versus there are some countries that when they come here to Georgia they can only spend a month, but Americans, Canadians, people from the UK, most people from Europe can come and they can actually spend a year, just 365 days without having to renew the visa here. And most people actually have visa-free access on arrival, which is really, really nice. But the point is you want to come here, you want to set up, you want to plant some roots, right? So even if you're not interested in parking $100,000 in property, even if you're not interested to start working here physically in Georgia, even if you're not interested in doing something like studying in Georgia, come here, set up a bank account. Very, very easy to do. Extremely low taxes. I love the tax system here. It's really incredible. You can effectively get your taxes to under 5% relatively easy here if you're an entrepreneur in Georgia. I can make another video on this. If you're curious on that, let me know in the comments down below. I also plan to make one last video here in Georgia talking about my kind of analysis of the Tbilisi real estate market, because I did that with Batumi on the Black Sea. But that all being said, I want you to understand that, right? So you have these options to either kind of to go ahead and invest in real estate before you have kind of come and set things up. So come meet with some lawyers, meet with a banker, kind of meet with some locals, and then you're kind of getting some roots here, and you're going to ask yourself, okay, would I want to live here for 6 years to get that actual permanent residency, right? So that's the main thing you have to understand is, would you be happy living here? Because I'm always looking at things as kind of this time cost analysis, right? You could also think about this as opportunity cost, right? Opportunity cost is not just in money, right? It's not just in the capital you're investing in it, whatever it is. It's also the time. So that opportunity cost of the time you spent here. Otherwise, you could just be doing this. I mean, you could, if all you want is a second passport and you don't care the countries that it's open to, you just want that second passport. Hey, go to the Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis has an easy option to $150,000 basically. And at the end of the day, it'll be somewhere closer to $200,000. But the main thing you want to understand here is you have all these options, right? This world is becoming more and more borderless, right? It doesn't necessarily matter where you live. Most people are working from home, working remotely, and these are things where you want to come, you want to set up roots before you go ahead and make a big capital investment, before you go, hey, I'm going to live here for 6 years. What if you're not going to like it within your first 6 months, right? So that's something you have to ask yourself, and I highly recommend you do that. Besides all this being said, so we talked about all those residency programs. Again, residency, remember, 6 years you get that permanent residency. You can essentially apply for it, right? So it's not saying you're guaranteed it after 6 years. You have to apply for it. There's certain paperwork that you have to go through, and then 5 years. Once you get that permanent residency, then you can actually get citizenship by naturalization. Okay, so you have to understand that. Lastly, the citizenship by acceptance program, whatever you want to call it, citizenship by investment, citizenship by donation. Yes, it's an investment. Yes, it's a donation. Yes, they are accepting you, right? So the thing here is, like I said, this is not something where you would be able to look it up. This is called an unofficial program. So you have to understand, I would highly recommend meeting with a local Georgian lawyer, trying to meet with some officials in the Georgia government, which is relatively easy to do. That's one thing I love about this country is I've met with a lot of top people, and it's nice. It's an incredible country. Again, I love the banking sector. I love the opportunities for business owners. But the main thing to understand here with the citizenship by acceptance program, again, you can kind of interchange all those different words: investment, donation, acceptance. But I like to kind of draw the line between a true citizenship by investment program like Turkey, for example. Turkey, it's around $250,000. In real estate, you can break that up however you want. The passport's not as nice as the Georgian passport, but basically that is a true citizenship by investment. In this case, the citizenship by investment is really a citizenship by donation. So you're basically making a contribution to the Georgian government. And with this, if you know the proper people, and again, this can be done legally. This is not some like shady backdoor thing where you're slipping somebody money. None of the things we talk about on this channel are about that. Those are things that you want to stay away from, especially kind of in the, I would say the offshore world, or whatever you want to call it, the global investment world. But essentially it comes down to $200,000. And the reason that this program has kind of been a back and forth, first of all, is because it's an unofficial program. And second of all, what you have to understand here is that this program, especially if you have to get the naturalization, so if you're looking to go from residency and you want to get citizenship by naturalization, you have to learn the Georgian language. So after 6 years, 5 years, you probably are going to know these things, right? You're probably going to pick up some of these things and you'll be able to pass a language test. But if you're coming in with this situation, you can literally acquire it within a month. Certain times I wouldn't recommend this, but you don't even actually physically have to be here in Georgia. You can just go to a Georgian embassy and actually acquire this. But again, you have to know the proper people. It's kind of more convoluted than this. If you have any questions, again, just email us down below at contact@investglobal.io. So there's a link for that down below in the description. Besides that, it's one of these things where it is quite interesting, right? Because you can acquire this within a month, basically. You don't have to actually be here. And they've rolled back this with the citizenship by acceptance program, right? So they've rolled back the whole idea that you have to learn the Georgian language, because it's not really that practical, right? If somebody's going to acquire this within 1 month, it's kind of this language where it's similar to Serbia. I remember when I was there was a lot of these countries that I've been to, where you meet with the local kind of like older people and they say, hey, this language is the best language in the world. Everyone around the world speaks it, and they've never been out of their home country, right? I'm not saying that Georgian people would say that, but I'm saying that there's certain languages where if you're looking to do business internationally, that you want to know. I would say you want to know English, you want to know Mandarin, you want to know Russian, probably want to speak a little bit of Portuguese. These things are important, right? So when it comes to Serbian or Montenegrin or Georgian, right? Like these are languages where they're beautiful languages, incredible, like especially if you're born here, that's your mother tongue, so I recommend you learn those languages. And it's great if you're going to be living here to learn these things. But if the whole point is the barrier to entry of that citizenship by investment program was that $200,000, which it'll probably end up costing you just a little bit over that when it comes to all the lawyer fees and everything, you have to factor that in. But basically, you don't want to have that barrier of entry for someone who's looking to contribute to the country, right? To be accepted into the country with the citizenship. So this is kind of why they rolled that back. So after all those things being said, we talked about kind of those, I would say, 4 main ways to acquire citizenship. These 3 with the residency take a bit longer, right? You have citizenship by naturalization, you have to understand the language. The last one, a bit unofficial. So, maybe you're watching this in 2022 and it's no longer there, right? So these are options where you kind of have to jump on the ball if you're interested in it. So again, you can reach out to us. You don't have to. You can do whatever you want, right? I'm not telling you to do anything. But lastly, the Georgian passport. I mean, I think it's a very, very interesting passport overall. You have the Schengen zone, so you have kind of like visa-free access to a lot of that. So people are looking for that for a European passport. I think it's one of the easiest ways to get a Schengen zone passport, especially when you compare this with some of the other options out there. You also have some other countries that do offer interesting opportunities, like Montenegro, for example. They actually had to roll back their citizenship by investment program, and it was a true citizenship by investment program. But you see this kind of trend of more countries stopping doing this, right? So that's why some people are interested in the Balkans. I've worked with some who really love the Balkan region, and I really like Albania. I really like North Macedonia. Kosovo is an interesting option, but they don't really have much as far as citizenship by investment and residency. I would say Kosovo is probably the most frontier market in Europe, I would say. And some countries don't even recognize Kosovo. But anyways, whole point is, right, so you have visa-free access to those countries. You can get into a lot of South America, but you're restricted from the United States, you're restricted from Canada, you're restricted from Russia, you're restricted from China. So what is the upside here with the passport? I personally think if your only other passport is, let's say, a Caribbean passport, and most people, when they invest in St. Kitts and Nevis, right, like I talked about, where it's really $150,000, but when you factor in legal fees and all these different things, it's going to be $200,000. Most people, when they acquire that passport, they don't actually live there, right? So they do a citizenship, it's really citizenship by donation in that case, and it's an official program, right? So this is one of the longest standing programs. A large part of their economy is based off this. It used to be like a sugar country where a lot of their economy was based on that, like sugar farms. But now people essentially acquire this passport because it has a very, very low barrier to entry. You can get it very, very simply. Some people are renouncing from their home countries and doing these things. But again, most people don't actually live there. You don't even have to actually physically be there. But with Georgia, I think a lot of people who are wanting this passport really love the country. So if I can leave you with anything, obviously do your own research into all these things. They're subject to change. Consult your lawyer, consult whoever it is. But come visit the country. It's a beautiful country. Set up a bank account. rent an apartment, whatever it is. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, definitely hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, hit the notification bell and click all. I talk about all different global investment strategies. Let me know in the comments what you think about all these different programs, any concerns, anything, let me know. That's all for this one, Invest Global, and until next time.